Hi, you're now watching the smoking section, and I am very pleased to have a fellow member of Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights on, David Ajemian. And David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here again.
It's always much easier to do a show when I can bounce ideas off another person rather than rely on myself, especially when I don't do a lot of preparation, and especially if not enough people call.
Right.
We were chatting before the show, and I thought I would let you start off with an idea that you had. So go ahead, surprise me.
Well, I was on Facebook the other day, and I was commenting on a friend's post about the smoking bans in England.
Yes, right.
And someone made a comment about blowing smoke in people's faces, and
Right.
it occurred to me that in all the times that I've smoked around Boston and Cambridge, I have to say I've had absolutely no complaints from anyone in my vicinity.
Yeah, right.
ever saying either can you move or
Yes.
can you put that out?
Right.
And it occurred to me that I guess that these laws have become so stringent that it's really very rare that you would irritate somebody.
That you would be able to blow smoke in someone's face.
Yeah.
Well, of course, that reminds me of a memory I have on Dunster Street. There used to be it may have been on Holyoke Street. It was on Holyoke Street. There used to be a dry cleaner there. And I guess sometime in the 80s, I went into the dry cleaner to get probably a shirt or drop off a shirt, I can't remember. And the young attractive woman who was working behind the counter had just taken a drag on a cigarette, because this was in the 80s, and people were able to smoke comfortably where they worked or wherever. And she had just taken a drag, and as she came up to me, she kind of blew the smoke all in my face, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Oh.
Not that she wasn't like prostrate with apology, but and it was funny because I laughed. I thought it was funny, and I think she thought it was kind of funny too, but it's just at that very moment. So she indeed did literally blow smoke in my face.
But it didn't bother you.
Of course not.
No,
But I don't
no.
think it really would have bothered many people, because in the early 80s, I've been a smokers' rights activist for so long that I am very, very cognizant of changes in people's attitude. So, for example, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to ask you if you ever get any complaints in the course of your smoking around this area at all.
Occasionally I do, yes. Occasionally someone will come up to me and say, so very occasionally.
Mm-hmm. And is that like if you're in an area that's more public or more frequented, or on a bench, or?
I can just remember 2 times I was approaching the library, the Cambridge Public Library, and I had my pipe in my mouth, and I was getting very near the door, and some guy said to me, "Are you gonna smoke right in the building?" or something like that.
Okay.
And I didn't even hear him say it. It took me a while for me to process what he had said. I could not make a retort. But that's one time. And then one time I was sitting right outside this cafe over here, and the cafe next door with Jonathan Bowen Leopold.
Mm-hmm.
Bowen Leopold, and some guy walked out and said something about our smoke. I don't know. But those are 2 times I remember recently. I've never had a scene. There's never been a scene.
There's probably 2 types of people. There's probably people who just object to it in principle, and then there are people who actually are offended, if the smoke is actually coming near them, there's two different reactions probably.
Yeah, it's just,
But that gets into this question you said you were asked recently about what is the war on smoking?
right. Yeah, someone asked me that while I was tabling.
Because that really is that's a term that perhaps we smokers would use more than the man on the street.
Yes, that is true, because they know what the war on drugs is, but they don't know what the war on smoking is, and I guess not. I mean, it always interests me because, for example, one of the anti-smoking propaganda talking points is that 480,000 people die each year in the United States from smoking related, because of smoking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they phrase it exactly. They probably say, smoking associated or what have you, preventable deaths. It's all very vague, and I'm surprised that so very few people I know even know that number. Do you know that number?
No.
Really? I mean, it's
Not at
been
all.
highly, highly publicized by anti-smokers in almost every article that, God, if you did a Google search of that number, my God, in the last 10 years, the number of times it's been repeated, it's got to be close to infinite.
480,000.
That is the number, that is, right now, that is the number, I think, or close to that number, that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention uses.
Well, that's really strong. That's strong propaganda.
Yeah, it is, but
tool,
the question is, I'm so surprised that most people don't know it. But it's like everything else. If you're not interested in smoking or interested in the war on smoking, you would not know that number. Whereas if you are a smokers' rights advocate,
Right.
or if you are an anti-smoking Nazi, you would know that number.
Well, now what about the figures? I often hear people say that smokers are costing taxpayers money because of all the health
Right.
expenses. Do you know what figures are tossed around with that?
Well, I don't know the national figure, but I do know that in 1996, just prior to Massachusetts suing the tobacco industry, and there was a large number of states sued the tobacco industry in the middle 90s, and it resulted in something called the Master Settlement Agreement between the tobacco companies and 46 state attorneys general. And I know that the Attorney General in 1996, Scott Harshbarger, got up in front of some crowd or someplace, television, radio, whatever, and said that the tobacco companies, or that tobacco costs the state of Massachusetts $200 million a year in medical expenses.
I've had run-ins with him before.
Oh, Scott Harshbarger.
Yeah, he's yes.
Well, he
Former,
hasn't been a state attorney general for a long time.
No, I think he ran for governor maybe once.
Yes, he did. He did. As a matter of fact, no, wait, no. I don't think he did. He may have. No, you may be right. Yeah.
Yeah. So 200 million, meaning that all the costs associated with treating emphysema and heart disease.
Well, it had. Presumably, it's. One would say all the costs related to treating heart disease and emphysema that is contracted, that are contracted by people who smoke and because they smoked. I wouldn't say that they would include in that figure the cost of treating heart disease for people who never smoked.
Right. That's what I mean. Right.
But the last time I looked at the figure, it had grown. The figure had grown.
Right. Well, that's always a ploy to attract the man on the street if he feels that his tax dollars are being wasted.
Yeah, right.
So that's a potent weapon.
Well, do you know what the number has grown to?
No, is it?
Well, between 1996 and 2017, that's approximately 21 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the number of smokers in the state of Massachusetts in that period of time, the rate of smoking has declined significantly. But now the number that I believe the public Department of Public Health, State Department of Public Health gives us 4.3 billion.
In Massachusetts alone.
That's correct. So it's grown
That seems
as the number of
astronomical.
smokers has declined in the last 20 years. The putative costs of treating smokers for medical conditions caused by smoking, presumably, has increased about, I think, I did the math, I think that's increased 20 times.
Doesn't
2,000%.
Doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't add up. It doesn't exactly hold water. It's like pulled from air statistics, which much, in fact, not most of anti-smoking propaganda is. It's just. But I mean, David, you've heard me talk about smoking and taxes before, haven't you? And the alleged costs.
Not too much, but
You really haven't? Because
No.
I could go through it again if you want.
I'd be interested in learning more.
Okay, there are 3 reasons that smokers do not cost. Well, if you say smokers cost X number of dollars per year in treating their medical conditions, you presume that that means X number of dollars more than non-smokers. I mean, because you assume that they mean if they didn't smoke, they wouldn't cost that amount of money.
Right.
So, in other words, why do smokers not cost the state more than non-smokers? There are 3 reasons for that. Number 1, if you, simply because you don't smoke, doesn't mean you won't get sick and run up very high medical bills. So you would have to compare how much smokers cost vis-a-vis non-smokers.
Right.
The hospitals don't keep track of how many people are smoking and how many people don't smoke and what diseases they have. These are all the production of, computer models. But still, let's just say, so you have to figure out how much do smokers cost. So for example, just because someone doesn't smoke doesn't mean they won't get sick and perhaps even a higher cost than smokers.
So in other words, when they're talking about 4.3 billion for smokers, you might as well have a comparable figure for non-smokers.
That's right. And we'd have to see, well, if it's, let's say it was 4.3 billion for smokers and 4.5 billion for non-smokers, if you're talking dollars and cents, then you would encourage people to smoke. That's all your criterion is. Okay, the second reason is that if you look at actuary tables, smokers live shorter lives than non-smokers. Now I would say that has nothing to do with their smoking, it has to do with the kinds of groups of population who chooses to smoke versus the population who doesn't smoke. That's nothing necessarily to do with smoking. I mean, like my friend Hyde, who was very schizophrenic and died at the age of 73, which isn't all that young.
Right.
But, many schizophrenics smoke, they die from all kinds of reasons like freezing in the street, violence, suicide. So, smokers die younger than non-smokers, therefore they collect less over their lifetime in Medicare, Social Security, pensions, and annuities.
Which offsets the other figure, the alleged other.
Well, right, both of these, like for example, my Borghild, the woman I speak to every week, who's in her late 90s, she's been collecting Social Security for 30 years now, more than. Now, if you're a smoker who dies at the age of 65, you may never get Social Security, you may never get Medicare, you may never get pension. So that figure is another thing that has to be considered. And then of course the third, and perhaps the most important figure, is that we smokers over our lifetime pay a huge amount of taxes that non-smokers don't pay.
Of course, you're right.
So any study that's been done of that, and there have been studies have done of that, have shown that smokers actually end up costing the state less than non-smokers. We should be getting a refund, from the state rather than piling higher taxes on putatively because we cost more.
Do you know what the amount of cigarette taxes the Commonwealth accumulates over the course of a year?
Yes, I do.
Is it in the billions or
No,
billions?
it's not in the billions. It's 900 million, according to this is a figure that comes from anti-smoking groups, like the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. That's $900 million from that 15% of the Massachusetts population who smoke.
Well, I would think it would be pretty easy to get an accurate figure on that from the state, right? I mean, because they must keep track
I
of
think it
cigarette
would be
purchases.
fairly easy, yeah, but I think it would be fairly easy, but of course, I'm also talking, the state makes about 900 million, yeah. That, I didn't think of that, but that doesn't count what the federal government makes. Because the federal government gets $1 on every package of cigarette that's sold in Massachusetts.
Wow.
In addition to what the state gets. The figure that I've seen is $900 million a year from us smokers. I mean, without our $900 million, forget Romney Care. The whole state would be, it would be a serious burden. I mean, it's not, I think, the tobacco, and you also have to figure the tobacco tax goes back probably before Massachusetts was even a state. The tobacco tax is one of the first taxes that the colonies ever imposed.
Right. Okay.
We're going back. There wasn't any a gasoline excise tax. There wasn't any automobile tax. I don't know if there's any kind of liquor tax. There certainly wasn't an income tax. So they have been collecting tobacco taxes for 400 years. So in other words, if you compound that and the fact that we're paying $900 million a year, I mean, the amount of money that the state of Massachusetts made from tobacco is probably incalculable. It's probably it's not that easy to find these numbers, by the way.
Really?
No, it's not that. I mean, $900 million a year is what the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids said, and other anti-smoking groups, and I'll happily use that number. But if I went to the actual state agencies and try to figure that out, because you got the state, you got the sales tax that goes to the state, you have the excise tax that goes to the state, and you have the master settlement agreement surcharge, which most experts, even non-smoking, anti-smoking experts, consider to be a tax. So you got to get all those three figures.
And then this is what our tabling efforts are designed to spread information about, right? The petition to reduce taxes.
Well, we don't really have a petition right now.
Didn't we last year?
We did at one point, but at this point we don't. We don't have an actual petition drive.
It's a difficult. I know we had to get a certain number of signatures.
Well, that was to get something on the ballot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's a war, the war on smoking is certainly. It hasn't been completely successful.
No, it hasn't been completely successful.
As you walk down the streets, you see an enormous amount of people still smoking, even if they're huddled in the alleyways.
Right, and we if you went to our Facebook page today, which you should have, of course, but you probably didn't, you would have seen that there's a cigar bar opening in Boston.
Really?
Yeah, against all odds, right? Yeah.
Well, I remember there was one on Boylston Street about 10 years ago. Remember that one? Is that?
Yeah. No, there's only one cigar bar right now functioning in.
Oh.
But we should go. Supposedly, there's some hookah bars we should go to. And I've been trying.
Hookah.
But I don't know how a hookah bar can do business, because I don't know. Supposedly there is a hookah bar in Charlestown or something.
Emily might know about that.
Well, Emily has spoken about it, but I don't think she's ever been there.
Could be a field trip.
A field trip, Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights field trip.
Yes.
But I wonder can people read this, do you think? No, I don't think so. Can they? No.
I can see it.
But we don't have a camera here. I mean, we don't have an overhead camera. This is what you call a primary document. And it's called Blueprint for Success. It was compiled in 1990 by the American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, American Lung Association. Countdown 2000, 10 years to a tobacco-free America.
1990s.
Yeah.
We're talking almost 30 years.
That's correct, yeah. And so the former Surgeon General C. Everett Koop wanted to make America tobacco-free by the year 2000.
And I know Richard Nixon wanted to conquer cancer in the early 70s.
Right, well, you know, the cancer establishment set a goal that they would cure cancer by 1976.
It's remarkable.
God bless them.
Yeah.
And all they need is a few $100 more billion, and I'm sure they'll do it right away. Well, I mean, you know, what's his name? The vice president under Obama?
Biden?
Biden, he wants to have a cancer moonshot.
Like a commemorative moonshot.
He wants, you know, a massive infusion of money. Well, I mean, I think he was particularly because his son died of, I think, brain cancer at the age of 46. And then Obama has spoken about, you know, brain, huge, massive infusion for brain research to fend off the looming Alzheimer's epidemic. And then you have also the opioid establishment who is clamoring for massive infusions of money to fight the opioid epidemic.
Right. Well, that reminds me of the war on drugs.
And you have the war on drugs.
Which I don't know has not been that successful.
Well, it certainly hasn't been that successful. But as I was telling somebody else, we don't know what it would be like if we hadn't had the war on drugs. Maybe things would be worse. I don't know. It's hard to say.
It is interesting how many people are fine with legalizing recreational drugs who want to stamp out tobacco.
Yeah, that's right.
always
That's right.
interesting.
A very successful public relations campaign on the part of anti-smokers, and they have, to a large extent, been very successful. And I have to, you know, take my hat off to them in that regard, you know? I mean, I think they're unscrupulous, and I think they're liars, but they have been willing to work very hard and persevere, and they've been very clever.
Well, I noticed that, and one thing I mentioned this comment on this post that I was on, and this person made the comment that, you know, smoking is it's a vile, noxious, disgusting habit.
Yes.
Those are such loaded expressions because I mean, and it's funny because I think before I resumed smoking again a few years ago, those words might have resonated with me as well.
Is that right?
Because you get a certain there's a certain mindset which is that, you know, you start picturing the more sensual images of, you know, foul smells and black lungs and things like that, which are really more, you know, emotional images, I think.
Well, also
as opposed to the you know, the pleasure of enjoying a cigarette, which is an entirely different, you know, reality than this image.
Well, the population has been hypersensitized to the point where they are bothered by something that is totally harmless, to wit, secondhand smoke, but it actually causes them, like, I mean, I think they're so highly sensitized now that I think there are a lot of people who could see smoking in a movie and it could trigger an asthma attack. You know, just seeing it. Obviously it's not the smoke.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, that's what you call, it's like brainwashing, you know. But this is the Countdown 2000 blueprint for success. In recent decades, the U.S. tobacco manufacturers have spent untold billions of dollars to protect and expand the sales of their addictive and deadly products. These unconscionable peddlers of destruction pose an enormous and well-financed challenge to voluntary health agencies. I don't know what they mean by voluntary health agencies. I guess are the American Heart Association and so forth, because those are, you know, they're not government agencies. But that's the blueprint for success.
Wow. I mean, the vocabulary says it all, doesn't it?
Well, it
It's-
certainly is very, what is the word? Vitriolic, right?
Yeah. Vituperative.
Fatuperative. Well, you know, it's also like, somewhere I read recently, if you want to organize people and get them to feel a commonality, you can do that much more easily with hate than love. You know, if you get them all to hate somebody like the tobacco industry, you know?
Right, yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's like, you remember that character in 1984?
Yeah, they what do they call the 2 minutes hate or something?
Yes.
Where everybody would start yelling at their TV screen.
And there would be a picture of a man that no one
Yes,
even knew who
yes.
he was.
Right?
But this is a way to kind of introduce a sense of community, you know, if you get, you know, and, you know, certainly anybody who speaks of other Americans in that regard, you know, I mean, I think you've got to question what kind of person they are to, you know, people who are filled with such hate and want to get other people to, you know, despise, you know, a group of people that otherwise.
It might not be that they're hating the people as much as they're hating the. I think it's maybe based in fear. I mean, they fear smoking because they fear disease and illness, you know, and death.
Well,
And-
listen,
and-
David,
Yeah.
we got to say goodbye. Thanks for watching.
Bye bye.